Huo Yuhao is not allowed to go. Class 8 Decomposition Canon. Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 Peerless Tang Men based on novel. Hikaitu turned around to look at him and laughed. What backstab? I would say the same even if you were in front of me. You have been too wild outside recently. We have been the ones dealing with so much of the sect's internal affairs, and it's your turn to stay back this time. Huo Yuhao chortled and said, I'm not very good at resolving the sect's internal affairs. Eldest senior brother won't rest assured giving me those responsibilities, right? I'm better at fighting instead. Furthermore, I'm the Tang sect's main control type soul master, and if I'm not there, everyone's strength will be greatly diminished. He was a little worried that Bei wouldn't let him go. Huo Yuhao's individual fighting strength was one of the best within the Tang sect. More importantly, he was the only true control type soul master within the Tang sect. Everyone's overall fighting strength would be greatly boosted with him around. Furthermore, he had always been the one in command in battles. Bei nodded slightly and said, It's quite impossible to fight in the outside world without little junior brother. The truth is, I do want him to keep him here to deal with the sect's internal affairs. Hi, we'll do that after this operation. Huo Yuhao glanced at Hikaitu proudly as Hikaitu retorted dejectedly, You can't be biased, eldest senior brother. Don't we have Dean Yang and Elder Song commanding the team this time? Little junior brother's absence won't mean much. Huo Yuhao immediately said virtuously, You can't say that, second senior brother. The Sun Moon Empire's aerial surveillance soul tools are developing very quickly, and I have been fighting against them consistently. I have a deep understanding of the Sun Moon Empire's way of battle. Furthermore, the situation at the front lines is still a mystery, and we don't know where teacher Xiao Ya is located. With my spiritual detection, searching for her will be a lot easier. Elder Shen has already said, we have to confuse our opponents as much as possible in this operation. Your fighting strength with soul tools is so formidable, second senior brother. So what if we expose our academy's soul tool standards to them? Won't that undermine our complete plan? Hikaitu was rendered speechless by Huo Yuhao's words. The truth was that Hikaitu staying behind was most appropriate this time. However, he hadn't been outside for a long time, and was itching to do something. More importantly, Xiao was also participating in this expedition, and he was a little worried inside, as he wanted to protect her. I agree to let him stay behind. A deep voice could be heard at this moment. Everyone turned towards where this voice came from, and it was Shen Xuan, who was sitting just below Bei's position. Everyone else's words were probably not so effective, but Shen Xuan's words immediately made Hikaitu smile. Who was Shen Xuan? He was the master of the Tang sect's Soul Tool Hall, and he deserved much credit for the Tang sect's recent developments. He held a very high status within the Tang sect, and everyone in the Tang sect's senior levels treated him with respect, like a teacher. He was Huo Yuhao's teacher in the first place, and even Bei had to respect his opinions. Huo Yuhao's expression immediately crumbled. Teacher Shen, you. Shen Xuan grunted and said, You still have the audacity to talk back to me. How long have you spent not studying soul tool construction? Don't forget, you're already a Class 7 soul engineer. Furthermore, I would not allow it even if you wanted to forego your development as a soul engineer. Why? Huo Yuhao stared at Shen Xuan confusedly. He remembered very clearly that he had made an agreement with teacher Shen that they would focus on using all sorts of soul tools, and they would focus less on forging soul tools. They would focus more of their attention towards developing his abilities as a soul master. He had twin martial souls after all, and he was already a high-tier soul master at his current rank. His normal cultivation speed would be affected if he continued to train as both soul master and soul engineer at the same time. Of course, that was the reason Huo Yuhao had given back then when he was discussing it with Shen Xuan. The truth, however, was that ever since he had obtained his spiritual soul core, and after he had absorbed the manifold mysterious ice essence, training as a soul engineer at the same time wouldn't affect his cultivation speed much. Shen Xuan snickered and said, "You dug this hole for yourself, Yuhao. Do you remember those rare metals that you let Huo bring back here? Are you talking about the divine ice crystals?" Huo Yuhao asked. Shen Xuan nodded and said, "Yes, I'm talking about those divine ice crystals. I have never seen that kind of rare metal before, and I began to inspect it once she brought it back. I used all sorts of methods to investigate this rare metal's characteristics, and I have finally come to a conclusion." Shen Xuan stood up as he stopped there. He surveyed everyone in the Tang sect before he lowered his voice and said, "The divine ice crystal's quality is comparable to any of the top-tier rare metals in the world today. Furthermore, it can only be equal or better. This means that the divine ice crystals can be used to forge Class 9 soul tools, and it can even be used as materials for forging Class 10 soul tools. I've heard from Huo that you obtained quite a bit of these things." Huo Yuhao hurriedly nodded and said, "Yes. I have obtained quite a bit of it. Teacher Shen, I'll give it all to you. What do you think? After all, you can just forge a suitable soul tool for me when the time comes." Shen Xuan chuckled once more, and his laughter evidently meant something else, as Huo Yuhao felt a chill run down his spine. Shen Xuan continued, "Yes, the divine ice crystal is very precious. However, you probably didn't realize that I can't craft things with the divine ice crystals after inspecting them." Eh? Huo Yuhao stared at Shen Xuan in shock. Why? Teacher Shen had officially become a Class 9 soul engineer. Even though he had just broken through to Class 9, that was only because Shen Xuan had been restricted by his own soul power. In terms of his knowledge regarding soul tools and forging them, he was one of the best across the entire continent. What use were rare metals that not even Teacher Shen could use to forge, no matter how precious they were? Shen Xuan laughed coldly and said, "That's because the divine ice crystals will continuously release intense chills when used. This chilly air is at least 100 degrees below zero, and at such temperatures, not even I can complete the job, even though I'm already a titled doluo. Both engraving formation arrays and crafting tools require the utmost concentration, and not a single mistake can be made. How can I craft soul tools with them under such circumstances? This means that the divine ice crystals are very good stuff, but you are the only one who can forge them into soul tools. That's because you are the only one with an ultimate ice martial soul, so you're not afraid of the cold exuding from that rare metal." Huo Yuhao's expression froze, and only now did he understand what was meant by shooting himself in the foot. Wasn't that right? Teacher Shen's words meant that he was probably the only one who could forge the divine ice crystals into soul tools within the Tang sect, and possibly within the entire academy. Furthermore, such top-tier materials had to be used to forge top-tier soul tools, and that couldn't be done without a lot of effort. He was still a Class 7 soul engineer in terms of forging soul tools. Teacher Shen didn't want him to leave, and that was evidently because he wanted Huo Yuhao to continue learning about forging soul tools from him. Teacher Shen, since these divine ice crystals will release very low temperatures during forging, will that affect its quality? If all the coldness within was released, it won't have any value even if the forging is successful. Huo Yuhao asked probingly. Shen Xuan continued, "You don't have to worry about that, because I've conducted experiments a long time ago. I have called the divine ice crystal a top-tier rare metal. How could I take it so seriously if I couldn't even resolve a problem like that? Divine ice crystals will release very low temperatures when struck from the outside, or when soul power is infused into them, but once those actions stop, the low temperatures will recede. This means that its own energies will be contained, and it will maintain its original state. The constant change in its temperature means there's nothing I can do to it. Otherwise, I would have already attempted to forge soul tools with it. What do you have left to say?" Huo Yuhao forced a laugh and said, "Can this wait until after I return?" "No," Shen Xuan said decisively, "you have been hanging around outside for so long, and you haven't been paying much attention to forging soul tools or working hard as a soul engineer. You will lose your skills if this continues. Don't think you can do what you like just because you're talented. You are still young, but your future will be limited if your heart isn't in the right place. It's time for you to focus and curb your distractions. Therefore, I am not allowing you to go this time. You'll stay in the Tang sect and deal with its internal affairs, as you learn about crafting soul tools with me. Very wise, Teacher Shen. He Kaitu bootlicked at an appropriate time. Shen Xuan glared at him and said, "Don't even try. He can't go, and you can't go either. Yuhao is right that now is the time to keep a low profile and accumulate our strength. We cannot expose our strength at crafting soul tools to the Sun Moon Empire. Furthermore, your development in forging soul tools has reached the standard of a Class 8 soul engineer, so you'd better stay at the academy to learn. I predict that once your soul power breaks through rank 80, you will become a Class 8 soul engineer." Hikaitu pulled a long face and said, "It's not as easy as it seems. I'm only at rank 75, Teacher Shen. You have to remain steady on your path," Shen Xuan said plainly. "Furthermore, I'll be the only one left if you leave. Doesn't that mean all the work is going to be piled onto me? You won't be very useful even if you go, so you'd better stay here and do some work. You can go out and do whatever you want once our 3 soul engineer legions have been established. For now, you are to do some hard labor for me." Hikaitu dropped back into his seat. How could he dare to displease Teacher Shen? He was still hoping for him to guide him to become a Class 9 soul engineer. Even though Hikaitu was a little low-spirited, because he hadn't been going out, his individual cultivation and his prowess with an understanding of soul tools had been improving exponentially over the past year. His strength was a far cry from what it was back in the day. Therefore, he didn't dare to retort even though he was depressed. Bei glanced at Huo Yuhao. He was still quite hesitant, as their operation's chances of success would be greatly boosted if Huo Yuhao was present. However, Shen Xuan had given so much blood and sweat for the Tang sect, and not even he could speak out against his wishes. Huo Yuhao suddenly said, "Teacher Shen, what do I have to do so that you'll let me go? Actually, I haven't been slacking in recent days." Shen Xuan snickered and said, "You haven't been slacking. All right. It's simple to prove that you haven't been slacking. Soul engineers will use the soul engineer's method. All you have to do is forge a Class 8 soul tool for me and show that you can use it. Only then will you prove to me that you haven't been slacking. Furthermore, you have to be able to use it perfectly. Otherwise, you will stay inside the sect, and not even think about going anywhere. And you can't leave until you become a soul doluor, and until you can forge a Class 8 soul tool. What do you think of my idea, sect leader?" Bei glanced at Shen Xuan, and then turned around to look at Huo Yuhao with a helpless look. Bei would have clapped his hands in applause for what Shen Xuan was doing if they weren't heading out to rescue Xiao Ya. However, this operation was extremely dangerous, and everyone would be able to predict their opponent's moves preemptively with Huo Yuhao around. But he couldn't contradict Shen Xuan and cause him to lose face, so he could only nod as he said, "I agree." Bei thought to himself, "Little junior brother, oh, little junior brother. Make your own luck. Whose fault is it that you've been spending so much time outside, to the point where not even Teacher Shen can look on anymore? There's nothing I can do to help you." Huo Yuhao sighed and said, "Teacher Shen, that's too cruel. Can I forge a Class 7 soul tool instead?" Shen Xuan grunted coldly and said, "Don't think I'm unaware that you have long been a Class 7 soul engineer. Even though there aren't many Class 7 soul tools you know to forge, crafting one with your spiritual power is not a problem, not to mention wielding one. You are a soul sage, and using a Class 7 soul tool is a piece of cake. There's no discussion. You have to forge a Class 8 soul tool." Huo Yuhao forced a laugh and said, "But, Teacher Shen, I haven't even seen a Class 8 soul tool's blueprint before. How can I do that?" Shen Xuan snapped, "And you still have the cheek to tell me you haven't been slacking." Huo Yuhao knew that he probably couldn't get out of this. Teacher Shen was extremely stubborn when he got serious, and nobody could say anything to change his mind. Huo Yuhao glanced at everyone else, and realized exasperatedly that most of his companions seemed to be rejoicing in his misfortune. Nan Qiuqiu's schadenfreude was most evident. "Why isn't anyone helping me?" Huo Yuhao was very aggrieved. Alright, Teacher Shen, I'll try. Can you give me blueprints for a Class 8 soul tool? If I can craft one and use it, you have to let me participate in this expedition. Can you give me a few days, eldest senior brother? Bei stared at him in surprise. You're really going to try, little junior brother? A Class 8 soul tool? Was that a joke? Before Shen Xuan had arrived in Shrek City, there were only several soul engineers within Shrek Academy who could forge Class 8 soul tools. Among them were Huo Yuhao and Hikaitu's teacher, Fan Yu, along with Qian Duo, their vice dean. Not even the Valkyrie Doluor, Xian Lina, was that confident in accomplishing that task. In the end, Xian Lina's main focus was as a soul master. She was the soul tool department's dean back then, more so, because she wanted to gain some dignity back from Yang Xiaozhe. Huo Yuhao was still so young. He was already struggling to craft a Class 7 soul tool back then, and it would be truly unbelievable if he could craft a Class 8 soul tool just like that. Bei tilted his head and said, "You are very stubbornly determined. If you want to try, then go for it. However, we will only wait 3 days for you, and then everyone will set off. I'll arrange some of the sect's various affairs within these 3 days, and you should make use of your time." Since Bei had approved Shen Xuan's request, he had to consider how to lead his companions to rescue Tang Yue if Huo Yuhao wasn't around. This was a serious matter, as they weren't that clear about the situation at the front lines. He had to use these few days to gather some intelligence from the front lines so that he could study it. Huo Yuhao was probably most adept at war and battle within the entire Tang sect. No one else there had really participated in the war before, and even when they did, Huo Yuhao was the one commanding them. Hikaitu and Huo Yuhao had participated in the Ultimate Soldier plan before, but Hikaitu was focused more on learning about support, mainly so that he could provide support for Huo Yuhao. Furthermore, Hikaitu wasn't going this time either. Huo Yuhao had a look of exasperation as he said, "All right, 3 days, then. Teacher Shen, please hurry and provide me with those blueprints. I will make that attempt now." Shen Xuan laughed. "You little rascal, now you know, polish your spear before battle. You have been wilding so much outside, now it's time to sit down and focus. Go, let me see how you are going to craft a Class 8 soul tool. Oh, right, call me when you're about to start crafting it. Don't think you can smoke through this. Nobody can help you this time. Do I look like someone who smokes through things?" Huo Yuhao retorted indignantly. However, his heart was pounding in his chest. The truth was that he had wanted to look for Teacher Fan Yu so that he could ask for his help. Huo Yuhao was confident that he would have no problem using a Class 8 soul tool. Shen Xuan's idea of using a Class 8 soul tool perfectly meant that he wanted Huo Yuhao to unleash the soul tool's full potential and strength. Huo Yuhao wouldn't be so confident back then, but everything was different now, because he actually had a cultivation rank that was worth 8 soul rings. Even though he hadn't obtained his 8th soul ring, using a Class 8 soul tool wouldn't be a problem. Seems like I can't take any shortcuts anymore, Huo Yuhao heaved a sigh inside. Since that's the case, then I'll just work hard at giving it a try. Teacher Shen still doesn't know that I have a spiritual soul core, and I have improved a lot at controlling the more delicate and fine aspects of forging a soul tool. I might actually have a chance. Shen Xuan had already handed over a stack of blueprints. A high-level soul tool couldn't be detailed clearly with just one blueprint. The soul tool had to be split into its shell, formation arrays, how it was assembled, how it was activated, and other crucial components. Every blueprint detailed a component, and the soul engineer still had to assemble everything after forging those components and experiment with it to ensure that the soul tool would be perfect. Huo Yuhao's face turned grey when he saw those blueprints. Shen Xuan was undoubtedly deliberately trying to make things difficult for him. There were more than 30 blueprints in this stack. Not even a Class 8 soul tool should be so complicated. Teacher Shen is clearly certain and correct that I don't have a Class 8 soul tool of my own, so he deliberately found one that is hard to forge and extremely complicated even amongst Class 8 soul tools for me. You're so mean, Teacher Shen. Those were Huo Yuhao's thoughts, but he wasn't angry at all. Shen Xuan was doing this for his own good, and Huo Yuhao was very clear about that. He knew that it was about time for him to settle down and focus on studying and cultivation. However, they were going to rescue Tang Yue this time. How could he not participate? No matter, I'm going to give everything in this attempt. It'll be my fault if I really can't complete this task. Huo Yuhao took the blueprints and immediately turned to leave. Hey, Yuhao, what about me? The Ice Bear King, Little Bai pointed at his own nose and asked. Everyone had already noticed this fatso, but there was definitely no problem with him since Huo Yuhao was the one who had brought him back, so nobody asked any questions. Huo Yuhao thought about it and said, "This is my friend, eldest senior brother. He will come with us to rescue teacher Xiao Yue. Can you arrange somewhere for him to stay? I will provide his food. I'm going to take my leave. Second senior brother, can you accompany me and help me prepare some materials?" Huo Yuhao was part of the Tang sect's core, but he wasn't very familiar with the Tang sect's Soul Tool Hall. This was especially so, because the Soul Tool Hall had been continuously refurbished and renovated in recent months and years, and Huo Yuhao really didn't know where to find the rare metals that he would need. In order to prevent teacher Xian from trapping him even more, Huo Yuhao decided to ask He Kai-tu for help. He Kai-tu chortled as he stood up and accompanied Huo Yuhao out. The truth was that he really wanted to see how Huo Yuhao could forge a Class 8 soul tool. He Kai-tu had been working very hard over the past year, and could even provide some help when Shen Xuan was crafting Class 8 soul tools. However, He Kai-tu wasn't confident at all in forging a Class 8 soul tool all by himself. After all, crafting a Class 8 soul tool was too delicate, and one needed formidable spiritual power and soul power for support. Furthermore, the materials needed for a Class 8 soul tool were very rare and precious. The more high-class and rare a material was, the more soul power expended in forging a soul tool. Many techniques in crafting Class 8 soul tools had to be completed in one go, and such a feat couldn't possibly be done without sufficiently powerful soul power. Huo Yuhao left with He Kai-tu, while Bei Bei and the others continued to discuss who would remain. He Kai-tu was definitely staying behind, while Nana accepted Bei Bei's order with a bitter look on her face. If Bei Bei wasn't there, the Tang sect would descend into chaos if their great butler wasn't around. Bei Bei felt that the Tang sect needed someone to hold down the fort. Jing Ziyan decided to stay behind after their final discussions. As everyone's strength increased, Jing Ziyan knew that her abilities were already lagging behind the Tang sect's prodigies, and she couldn't do much to help even if she participated. She had become a Soul Emperor far earlier than many of the Tang sect's individuals, but amongst the Tang sect's Shrek's 7 monsters, almost everyone now either had 7 soul rings, or were almost there, besides Wang Donga, who had gone missing while her soul power was only at rank 67. Furthermore, her martial soul didn't have any advantages, and thus she decided to stay behind so that she could actually contribute to the Tang sect. She was one with her husband anyway, and even if she didn't go, Ji Juechen would still definitely participate. The sword fanatic's thirst for battle was far too strong. Besides Jing Ziyan, Bei Bei decided after thorough consideration that he would bring along the rest of the Tang sect's core individuals. This operation was very important, and Huo Yuhao might not be able to participate. It was evident that their operation would fail if they didn't have sufficient strength. The final decision was for Bei Bei to take the leading role, while Xu Sanxia, Jiang Nan Nan, Xiao Xiao, Ji Juechen, Yi Gai, and Nan Qiuqiu would all participate. Of course, Huo Yuhao would have a spot on the team if he could pass his test. However, nobody believed that he could actually do it. Bei Bei and 4 others from Shrek's 7 monsters were part of this operation, excluding Huo Yuhao and He Kai-tu. In addition to the sword fanatic, who was also a Su sage, along with Yi Gai and Nan Qiuqiu, who were 2 soul emperors with special martial souls, their overall strength was unprecedentedly powerful. Of course, Bei Bei was very clear on the difference between having Huo Yuhao around and going on without him. Simply put, even if they encountered a titled Doluor, Huo Yuhao would give them a chance to kill their opponent with these prodigies' prowess. Without Huo Yuhao, the best they could do was protect themselves. But Din Yang and Elder Song, who were two transcendent Doluor, would also participate in this expedition. Their chances were probably quite good. Bei Bei began to prepare intricately after he decided who was to participate in this expedition. He had to make sure that the Tang sect's affairs were properly settled and arranged within the shortest possible time. At the same time, he had to make a trip to Shrek Academy's Soul Tool department so that he could request Xian Lina and Chen Duoduo's support, and so that these two deans could help him temporarily look after the Tang sect. To that end, the Tang sect wouldn't run into any problems. Huo Yuhao didn't have any energy to see how his eldest senior brother was arranging things. His thoughts were entirely occupied by how to forge a Class 8 soul tool. There was only one set of blueprints, and he didn't get to choose. Since he didn't get to choose, then he had to rely on his own effort. Fortunately, he had Hikaitu to help him. Even though he and Hikaitu had conflicted with each other for a chance to participate in this expedition, they were brothers after all, and how could Hikaitu sit by and watch when his brother was in trouble? The brothers entered one of the well-equipped silent rooms within the Soul Tool Hall. Huo Yuhao realized to his surprise that the silent room's layout was very particular and exquisite. There was an extremely large platform for crafting soul tools in the middle, and this platform's surface was silver-white, while there were all sorts of equipment and configurations around it. This seemed very similar from the one that he had used back in the Sun Moon Imperial Soul Engineering Academy, though this one was probably better. The reason was because there was some equipment and configurations that even he didn't know about. There were many metal racks and frames around the silent room. These racks weren't considered pleasing to the eye, but they were very practical, and that was because all sorts of rare metals were placed on these metal racks in all shapes and sizes. Typically, the more precious a rare metal was, the smaller the pieces on the racks would be. Forging soul tools would naturally become a lot more effective with a silent room such as this one. Huo Yuhao couldn't be bothered with admiring the Soul Tool Hall's current development, as he walked briskly before the table and laid out the blueprints that Shen Xuan had given him. Then, he started to study them closely. This was the first time that he had seen such detailed and comprehensive blueprints of a Class 8 soul tool, but this wasn't the first time that Hikaitu had seen such blueprints. Hikaitu's expression changed a little as he saw them. He couldn't help but utter, "Teacher Shen is cruel enough. Little junior brother, do you know what these blueprints are for?" Huo Yuhao was still looking at the rare metals that this soul tool required, but he hurriedly turned his attention towards the name on the blueprint's first page, when he heard Hikaitu's words. Huo Yuhao's expression also became extremely spectacular when he saw the name. Decomposition Cannon. The soul tool's name was just two simple words, but Huo Yuhao drew a cold breath. Of course he knew about decomposition cannons, and such soul tools appeared in various classes. However, decomposition cannons of the lowest class occurred as Class 6 soul tools. A decomposition cannon was a single-target offensive soul tool, and its core principles included the element of space, and making use of space's pyrolytic properties to create formidable destructive power. Decomposition cannons were one of the hardest types of soul tools to forge no matter which class they were in, while they were also considered one of the strongest single-target offensive soul tools within their respective classes. That was the reason why Hikaitu remarked that Teacher Shen was cruel. He was, indeed. Even Shen Xuan himself would have to put in some effort if he were to forge a Class 8 decomposition cannon himself. Furthermore, Huo Yuhao could vaguely remember that Shen Xuan had mentioned that Class 8 decomposition cannons were impractical and a waste of time. It had formidable attacking power, but forging it required too much effort, while the time and effort needed to forge such a cannon was enough to forge 3 other Class 8 soul tools. Even though these individual soul tools would have weaker attacking strengths, the 3 of them added together would still be stronger overall than a single decomposition cannon. Yet, Teacher Shen has chosen to use this decomposition cannon to stump me. Teacher Shen, oh, Teacher Shen. You are too cruel. Huo Yuhao wanted to cry, but no tears would come. But what else could he do? There was nothing he could do against Teacher Shen's authority. Huo Yuhao heaved a long sigh as he concentrated on studying those blueprints. Huo Yuhao had to make sure he knew what rare metals these blueprints required before he could gather those resources. He couldn't do anything more without sufficient materials, or everything else wouldn't matter, and he wouldn't even a chance to attempt this feat. What else was there to talk about? Fortunately, Shen Xuan just wanted to see what Huo Yuhao could do after slacking for so long. Therefore, there were no problems with resources even though he deliberately chose a difficult Class 8 soul tool to pin him down. Shrek Academy had been receiving support from the Doluo continent's 3 native empires in secret. They didn't have that many rare metals, but they could be considered well equipped. Even though their haul couldn't compare to the Sun Moon Empire's scale, the 3 empires' combined national strengths were sufficient to support all kinds of research and soul tool production. Huo Yuhao used 1 hour to gather all the materials that he required with Hikaitu's help, and only then did he begin perusing the blueprints for forging this soul tool. His expression quickly changed after just one look. So complicated, this is just too complicated. Teacher Xian, you're asking for my life. Huo Yuhao felt like he couldn't take it anymore after going through the blueprints for a little while. 24 pieces out of 30 were for designing formation arrays. Huo Yuhao wouldn't complain if 24 formation arrays were needed, because that was just a quantitative problem. He wouldn't have any trouble with that with his speed at crafting soul tools. The problem was that these 24 pieces actually depicted just 3 formation arrays, which meant that every formation array had 8 pieces on average, and what did that mean? That meant every formation array was as complicated as one could get. Those weren't simple 2-dimensional pictures, they were all 3-dimensional, they even breached topics of 4-dimensional spatial features. For instance, the most important formation array hovered within the soul tool. This was the first time that Huo Yuhao had even heard of a formation array being used this way, not to mention ever having seen one. Huo Yuhao felt like he didn't know where to start. A Class 8 soul tool. It really is a Class 8 soul tool after all. Huo Yuhao heaved a long sigh. Does heaven want to punish me? Huo Yuhao began to scrutinize those blueprints after momentary sighs and laments. He was never one to admit defeat just like that, and he had a defiant personality that made him stronger the more suffering he took. Huo Yuhao quickly immersed himself in his studies. He wasn't hasty to attempt to forge the soul tool, but he just studied and interpreted the blueprints intently. From Huo Yuhao's perspective, forging wasn't too difficult. Forging a Class 8 soul tool shouldn't be too difficult with his current soul power. That was especially so, because he had support from his formidable spiritual power. With his spiritual soul core, Huo Yuhao was confident that his spiritual power wasn't inferior, even compared to a Class 9 soul engineer. The crucial problem lay in understanding this soul tool's principles and its forging method before he could get any work started. Hikaitu was still watching from one side in the beginning, but he quickly realized that Huo Yuhao had been completely absorbed into the blueprints. Hikaitu was also staring at these blueprints seriously from the side, and even though these blueprints were so complicated that he wanted to vomit blood, they were still invaluable treasures for soul engineers like them. Not every soul engineer could obtain blueprints of such top-tier soul tools, and that was especially so for the Doluo continent's 3 original empires. Top-tier soul tool blueprints were considered extremely rare. However, Hikaitu felt like he couldn't keep going anymore after observing for a short while. The Class 8 Decomposition Cannon's blueprints were absolutely the most complicated ones amongst the various blueprints of Class 8 soul tools that he had seen. Furthermore, they weren't just complicated. Hikaitu felt like his head was spinning after just looking at those 3-dimensional blueprints for a short while. Hikaitu knew that he was lacking in spiritual power. Even though he was already working very hard, he knew that his spiritual power could only catch up after his soul power passed rank 85 for him to consider these blueprints. He stole a glance at Huo Yuhao, and discovered that Huo Yuhao was very seriously studying them, but he didn't seem like he was completely lost. Hikaitu couldn't help but feel a tinge of admiration and envy. Little junior brother's spiritual power is truly admirable. Soul engineers were more reliant on spiritual power in some sense compared to soul masters, and that was more the case as soul engineers became stronger. Time continued to pass. Hikaitu accompanied Huo Yuhao for another 2 hours inside the silent room, before he left quietly, as he knew that he could no longer help him in here. He didn't know how much time would pass before Huo Yuhao would awaken from his contemplation. He Kaitu left quietly and informed the Tang sect's other members that nobody was to disturb Huo Yuhao. One day passed in the blink of an eye, and Huo Yuhao had been inside the silent room from the beginning to the end. He Kaitu came to visit him twice discreetly, and Shen Xuan even came to see Huo Yuhao once. However, Huo Yuhao didn't speak, and neither did he move as he stared at those blueprints, like his entire being was completely immersed within them. He Kaitu sighed exasperatedly, while Shen Xuan was feeling happy inside. Of course, he knew how difficult it was to forge a Class 8 decomposition cannon. This was meant to deliberately stump Huo Yuhao, after all. Shen Xuan was clear that becoming a Class 9 soul engineer was his limit with his talents. That wasn't because his abilities at research weren't enough, but because he didn't have enough soul power. He couldn't possibly become a transcendent Doluo in the future, and if he couldn't become a transcendent Doluo, then he wouldn't have a chance to try to become a Class 10 soul engineer in the future. This video will end here.